Hello, welcome everyone. It is a pleasure and an honor to have Professor Jonathan Sarna with us here today to learn about white supremacy and anti-Semitism, lessons from the Capitol attack. This event is co-sponsored by Congregation Beth Israel, and Jonathan D. Sarna is a university professor and Joseph H. and Bell R. Braun Professor of American Jewish History at Brandeis University, where he directs the Schusterman Center for Israel Studies. He also chairs the Academic Advisory and Editorial Board of the Jacob Brader Marcus Center of the American Jewish Archives in Cincinnati, and serves as the chief historian of the National Museum of American Jewish History in Philadelphia. Author or editor of more than 30 books on American Jewish history and life, his American Judaism, A History, Yale of 2004, recently published in a second edition, won 6 awards, including the 2004 Everett Jewish Book of the Year Award from the Jewish Book Council. His most recent books are Coming to Terms with America, written in 2021 with Benjamin Chappell, Lincoln and Jews, A History, St. Martin's in 2015, and When General Grant Expelled the Jews from 2012. His annotated edition of Cora Wellburn's previously unknown 1860 novel, Casella Wayne, has also recently appeared. Dr. Sarna is married to Professor Ruth Langer, and they have 2 married children and 2 adorable grandchildren. So with that, I will lead it to having you speak, Professor Sarna.
Well, thank you. And it's really a great pleasure to be with all of you. I see some familiar faces and some faces that I hope will be familiar. And I'm certainly thrilled that this technology allows us to be together. I have to admit that the subject is a rather unhappy one, and I'm afraid that some of the content is a bit horrifying, but I think it's extraordinarily important to understand these matters, particularly because anti-Semitic elements of the January 6th insurrection have received, to my mind, insufficient attention. So I hope to shine a light on them today. If we could open the slides, we'll get started. Now, one of the many horrifying, I think, images from the January 6th rampage was this one, and I hope you can see there a bit on the left, a long-haired, long-bearded man. His name was Robert Keith Packer, wearing a black Camp Auschwitz t-shirt emblazoned with skull and crossbones, and under it is the phrase, hard to see, "Work brings freedom," an English translation of the Auschwitz concentration camp motto, Arbeit macht frei. On the back of that t-shirt was the word staff, as if he wished somehow that he had had the privilege of being a staff member at Auschwitz. Next slide, another image. It may have been taken a day or 2 earlier, is of a different man whose t-shirt was emblazoned, as you can see here, with the inscription mysterious 6MWE above the yellow symbols of Italian fascism. 6MWE is an acronym quite common among those on the far right, and alas, it stands for 6 million wasn't enough. Again, a reference, of course, to the extermination of Jews during the Nazi Holocaust, and it hints at the desire of the wearer of such a t-shirt to increase that number still further. this kind of coded language is very common in far-right circles. It's understood by the cognoscenti, by those who understand it, and others just are mystified. 6MWE. Now, these and related images captured on television, retweeted on social media, they demonstrate that some, I want to underscore some of those who traveled to Washington in support of then President Trump were engaged in much more than just a doomed effort to maintain their hero in power. As their writings make clear, some of them also hope to trigger what is known as the Great Revolution. Next slide, please. Based on a fictional account of a government takeover and race war that, in its most extreme form, would exterminate the Jews. I will come back to the Turner Diaries, but now let's back up a bit and let me point out, next slide, that calls to exterminate Jews are actually common in far-right and white nationalist circles. For example, the conspiracy theorists of QAnon, who hold that the world is full of a cabal of Satan-worshiping pedophiles who are plotting against Donald Trump. I know it's hard to believe that people believe that, but actually there are a lot of QAnon supporters who do, and they traffic in this kind of anti-Semitism. And this is, you may remember him, this is Jack Angeli. He is also now in jail, head of QAnon, who likewise was in the Capitol. Now, and I think we have another slide. Next slide, please. We have another slide. You can see that Q there, another slide of a QAnon, and a reminder that it is a movement that that attracts women and men alike. Now, QAnon, and actually many in the white nationalist camp, are greatly attracted to conspiracy theory. And it's important to understand a conspiracy theory. If we go to the next slide, we'll see that. The idea basically is to explain complex developments on the basis of massive demonic forces. The sense is there are individuals or groups, many times Jews, acting covertly to achieve a malevolent end. In other words, you may think that lots of disparate events happen. We know they're all related, and there is a puppet master, as you'll see, who is really shaping those events. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see the basic assumptions of conspiracy theorists. Number one, that the universe is governed by design. Nothing happens by accident. Number three, nothing is as it seems. You may think that that a forest fire is a forest fire, but we know that it's really caused by Jewish space lasers, and everything is connected. And indeed, if I go back to Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, you really can see how conspiracy theory works. The California forest fires, to her mind, are not an accident because nothing happens by accident. Instead, she insists that there is a plan of Jews, and they use their Jewish space lasers belonging to the Rothschilds to clear room for in the forest so that they can build a high-speed rail project. And note how she's connected in a, I think, an insane way, but connected all sorts of disparate phenomena. It's very hard to disprove, because how can you disprove something like that? But it fits these assumptions. There are no such things as accidents. Nothing is as it seems. And most importantly, everything is connected, and it always goes back in their mind to the Jews. Now, and certainly, we can see this with the conspiracy theory of QAnon. And if we go to the next slide, we can see the Mr. Q, who is the head, and he communicates in riddles. You can sort of see that, and he leaves clues. And what I wanted you to see here is this clearly anti-Semitic image that he retweeted. This could be a Nazi image complete with the Star of David, with the very phallic Jewish nose. And of course, what you see here is a Jew wallowing in the blood of Russians, Poles, Hungarians, Ukrainians. He didn't know they were going to be fighting one another. The Jew is really to blame. And he asks innocently, why do they persecute me so? It's important to know that this idea of long-nosed Jews dripping with the blood of non-Jews, whom, of course, they are falsely accused of murdering, there is a very long and tragic history to these kinds of images. It's hard to kill people, but if you persuade folks, oh, they're out to kill you, then it's easy. He's been killing Russians, Poles, Hungarians, Ukrainians. Suddenly, he's the subject, and we can kill him in much the same way that Russia insists now that the Ukrainians are full of Nazis. That allows people who might otherwise not be able to commit such a heinous crime to see them as less than human, and to want to kill them. But what I want to show you is how old this idea is. If we go to the next slide, you can see this idea that Jews are murderers and really engaged in blood libel goes all the way. This is Simon of Trent, goes all the way back to the Middle Ages, and that's what stirred up the masses. If I believe that the Jews are taking the blood of children, then of course they are not human beings like me, and I can justify murdering them. And we know that these in the Middle Ages were triggers for anti-Semitic violence, and that I think is in many ways still true today. That is the purpose of QAnon and all that business, which seems so nutty to many of us, pedophiles plotting against Donald Trump. That focus on pedophiles is a kind of echo of a very old anti-Semitic idea that we know as blood libel, that Jews are preying with an E, preying on Christian children. Now, next slide, more common, perhaps, than that conspiracy theory is the conspiracy theory involving George Soros, who's a billionaire philanthropist and investor of Jewish origin. He doesn't admit to being a Jewish, but anti-Semites know him as a Jew. But what I wanted you to see here is how he is connected to everything from the Ukraine and Black Lives Matter and Arab Spring and whatever the issue is, it is not complicated. It all goes back to one person. What is new here is simply that in the 19th century, many people believed that it was the Rothschilds who controlled the world. They were the puppet masters. Next slide, please. And more recently, as the Rothschilds are less known, we see it in Soros. But if you see this material, you can see the idea that Jews control the world really has a very long history in anti-Semitic literature. Next slide, please. Now, QAnon and many of the groups who we now know were central to the events of January 6th carefully mark Jews in their own writings, and they mark them with this triple parentheses, often known as an echo. Wolfowitz, Pearl, Feith, and so on. Of course, the problem is that not so easy to know who's Jewish. Jews actually look no different from anybody else, so they want to out Jews. They want to help you to distinguish Jews from others. And this is a reminder that in their mind, Jews are not true members of the white race. They are interlopers. On the left, people may imagine that Jews have become white folks, but on the extreme right, and that's the people who organized January 6th, Jews are pretenders to whiteness, and they want to out them as being, at the end of the day, Jews, and that's why there is an echo. If we go to the next slide, this involved me, so I'm wanted you to see it. This was a white nationalist website, a very popular one, that was found to have displayed lots of photographs of Jewish women and men, more women than men, but I was one of the men, and in my case, they even put my name there. They downloaded it from university websites, but the point was the same. They want to help their readers distinguish Jews from the Aryan master race. And the idea was that if you look at enough pictures, you'll become, if we go to the next slide, you'll see that you'll become more able to tell the difference between the Aryan a lady on the left. Someone told me that that's actually someone named Taylor Swift, and the Jewish somewhat overdone lady on the right, who they want you, who their claim is a child of Satan. Europeans are the children of God, referring to the left. They, and note that echo, that's the way of knowing they're talking about Jews. They are the children of Satan. And the point of the website, which downloaded our students, was so you can practice, so that eventually you'll know who you need to exterminate and who indeed is a proper member of the Aryan white race. Now, if you go to the next slide, you'll see that members here of the Proud Boys, which is another group that was involved in the events of January the 6th, and they likewise traffic in racist anti-Semitism. And Kyle Chapman, who also has been arrested now, promised to confront the Zionist criminals who wish to destroy our civilization. But I particularly wanted you to see this from their website, because it helps you to see. They've even invented a word, jiding, for Jews masquerading as whites for nefarious anti-white political purposes. Jews are not really white. They only pretend so as to shame, discredit, blame, mock, harass, and otherwise discomfort and discredit white people and the white race. And they then go on to declare white genocide is their plan. What Jews want to do is commit genocide of the white race. And now look at the horrific next phrase: counter-extermination is our response, again with the echo and with the explicit sense that the goal is to exterminate Jews who are such a danger to the United States. Moving on, we come, next slide, please. Moving on, we do come to the Proud Boys. Lots of these folks who you're seeing here are in jail. Maybe we'll go to the next. The leader, Kyle Chapman, we owe nothing to any other race. And note well how Zionist and Jew are used interchangeably in white nationalist rhetoric. To their mind, it's one and the same. Now, Chapman uses the term white genocide really as a kind of shorthand for the fear that members of the white population will soon be overwhelmed by people of color. And that is one of the defining fears. America is changing, and white people are soon going to be overwhelmed. And if we go to the next slide, we see a slogan which was seen on signs outside the Capitol on January 6th, but is also seen here in a very revealing way. 14 words, and the number 14 is important because when you see the number 14 in white nationalist rhetoric, that's this slogan: we must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. It was written, first I want to point a few things here. Note the swastika hidden on the shield. Note those bolts in the back, the lightning bolts, and this very Nazi German imagery of a kind that one rarely, until recently, saw in America after World War II. Those who've studied the books by George Massey about the Nazi body image recognize it here. And it really does show the influence of Nazi ideas, and see those skulls at the bottom hidden. And the person who composed this 14-word slogan was a man named David Lane. David Lane was one of the conspirators behind the 1984 assassination of the Jewish radio host Alan Berg. He composed, and we certainly won't have time to go through it, he composed not only 14 words, but 14 planks. If you go to the next slide, I've got them here, called the White Genocide Manifesto. The point is, Jews are not white. They endanger white civilization. And most importantly, we can keep going. I've got a few of them here. If you go linger on it a bit, the point is the idea that Western nations are ruled by a Zionist conspiracy to mix, overrun, and exterminate the white race. You see that in number 7. Certainly, this is influenced by the anti-Semitic forgery known as the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, but it actually goes further because it talks about the Zionist occupation government, or the acronym which one can now see in lots of places, ZOG. Again, outsiders have no idea what ZOG is, but insiders know it's the Zionist occupation government. And again, I remind you, Jew and Zionist are used interchangeably. ZOG implies Jews really control the government, and it blames them, as you keep going, for abortion, for homosexuality. Everything is connected. All of it comes back to Jews. All of these folks, and this is, the key point in their conspiracy theory. Now, all of these folks, I've talked of QAnon and Proud Boys, but it's true of far-right and alt-right groups, and certainly of those who converged on Washington, were really imagined that they were living out the great fantasy that underlies what is now considered to be the Bible of white nationalism. Next slide, please. A 1978 dystopian novel, we saw it earlier, The Turner Diaries. The man who really wrote them, we now know, is a man named William Luther Pierce, although he wrote under a pseudonym. And I have to say, The Turner Diaries, now it's hard to get. It used to be easily available on the web, which is where I read it, and you could get it through Amazon very cheaply. After January 6th, it became much harder to get, but we know how many folks read it. And in many ways, being a novel, it's certainly much more readable than the protocols. It's a novel depicting the violent overthrow of the government, followed by nuclear conflagration, race war, and then the extermination of non-whites and what are euphemistically called undesirable racial elements among the remaining white population. And it's perfectly clear that those are Jews. At the center, the next slide, please, at the center of the novel is something called the Day of the Rope. On the Day of the Rope, Jews, those who are married to non-whites, and other undesirables and non-whites are lynched. They are strung up all over town. And here you can really see just how influenced all of this is by Nazi ideology. Support, join your local Nazis. You see the swastika and so on. But the key to remember is that the Day of the Rope and the idea that there is no escaping the Day of the Rope comes straight out of the Turner Diaries, where that day is described in a very memorable chapter. And now I want to show you an image from January the 6th. Next. See that rope? Now, there are many interpretations of the rope, and but people like me think that in addition to it being for Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi, which is horrific enough, they also believed, and that's why they're holding it up, that they were beginning the insurrection described in the Turner Diaries, and the Day of the Rope was coming, and on that day, Jews and others would get what they deserve. And if we keep going, we can really see that mass lynchings, a takeover of Washington, sets up a worldwide conflagration, and the destruction both of Israel and of the Jewish people. Here, we won't have time to read it, but here you see the beginning of the day of the rope, tens of thousands of lampposts hanging people who betrayed their race. Let's go to the next. And here again, you see the close relation in their mind of Jews, of non-whites, of Israel, and so on, and attacking Israel is part of what will happen in their dystopia. Keep going. We are in a war to the death with the Jew. Your day is coming, Jews. Your day is coming. Indeed, by the end of the novel, the Jews are exterminated. Keep going. And here you see it. Within a week, the throat of the last Jewish survivor in the last kibbutz, in the last smoking ruin in Tel Aviv, had been cut. Jews have similarly been exterminated in other countries, and the hoped for day when Jews will be wiped out, 6 million was not enough, is depicted in the novel. Keep going, please. The liberation of North America, and in 11 months, the non-whites and undesirable racial elements among the whites, that's a euphemism, are all wiped out in less than a year. And that really is what folks on January 6th hoped they were beginning. And we come to the conclusion. The next slide, please. Yeah, so the Turner Diaries denouement, coupled with these anti-Semitic images that we saw on January the 6th, really serve as, I think, rather timely reminders of the precarious place, alas, Jews occupy in different corners of the United States, and subsequent events all over the country that, once we would not have believed. The takeover of synagogues, shootings in the synagogue, and so on, from Pittsburgh to Colleyville, even as some celebrate how Jews have become white and privileged, others, including, I think, many of those on January the 6th, dream of Jews' ultimate extermination. So I want to end on that unhappy note. I think, in a sense, we link this to Passover, where we read that in every generation, there are those who would like to wipe Jews out, and God protects us. Sadly, in our own day, there are those, even in the United States, who dream of extermination. So we have some time. It's Per, you tell me if there are questions or comments, and
yes, let's open up the floor. Does anyone have a question? You're welcome to unmute or raise your hand physically, virtually.
Do you see in the years of Trump's presidency that anti-Semitism became really part of a larger wave of hate against Asians, hate against Blacks, hate against anyone different? Or do you still see even a greater vulnerability and focus on Jews, or this was just more enabled because of this wider environment of hate?
So very good question, and absolutely right. It's actually long been true in the United States. If you go back to the Ku Klux Klan, famously, the Klan was opposed to African Americans, to Catholic Americans, to Jewish Americans. Today, I think you're absolutely right. Anti-Semitism, anti-Asian, and anti-Hispanic, as well as racism, anti-Black, are often linked. Hatred, and in the Turner Diaries, all of those groups are seen as non-white, and all of them are to be exterminated. This is the kind of white fantasy of these groups, that everybody will be exterminated except white people, and the future will be theirs. This is the antithesis of white genocide, which they talk about. I happened to be a student of anti-Semitism, so I focus on its anti-Jewish elements, but you are quite right that it is not only against Jews, and that is a little different than in some European countries where the only outsiders, the only outgroup were Jews. In America, it's long been true that there are multiple groups, but at the same time, we do need to be aware, and I talk a bit about anti-Semitism in other lectures and in classes. In the 1990s, I think there were lots of people who thought anti-Semitism was finished. There was even a book, I have it, called The End of American Anti-Semitism. And I think all of us are aware that it didn't turn out that way. And that too is important to remember. Yes, I see two other questions, but I don't know how to access them.
Lauren, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. With people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, is the Republican Party at risk of being taken over by QAnon conspiracy theorists? And what does that mean for Jews in America? Will that become an anti-Semitic racist party?
As a historian, I'm better at predicting the past than at predicting the future. I do think, I have to say, I think both parties have elements that are profoundly disturbing, that are pushing these parties to extremes. In the case of the Republican Party, indeed, there are QAnon and other people pushing it to the extreme right. In the case of the Democratic Party, there are anti-Israel and really lots of anti-Semitic tropes on the left pushing it in that direction. So more than we would expect, this is a fear. All I can say as a historian is that historically, the extremists can make a lot of noise, can have some influence, but they actually can't win an election. And that the quiet folks who make up the broad middle have tended at the end of the day to move people back to the middle. not in every election, but that has been the tendency. I think part of the reason for January 6th was the sense that America had moved back to the middle in the election of 2020, and these folks wanted to undo that. And I think there may be important lessons there about politics, but it is wise for Jews to be vigilant and nervous for the very reasons you said. And it is perfectly clear, just look at the present Congress, and it's been true throughout the 20th century, that haters can be elected from both parties. And there certainly are people in Congress with loud voices, both on the left and on the right, who hold views that, I think many of us would consider abhorrent.
Deborah?
Hi, can you comment on the military and paramilitary connections of these protesters and how high up the chain of command they go? I understand that they're, some of them have military connections. Certainly, I'm in Canada, and the Freedom Convoy in Canada, there were many military people who were involved, and that's certainly worrisome as well.
Well, we certainly know, if you go down the list of those who have already been arrested, there certainly were people with military records. There also were people, and this is rather sad, who had been released from the military, but really don't have decent jobs. And in some ways, there's an Israeli scholar who points out that anti-Semitism is really a cultural code, by which she means it tells us much more about the anti-Semite than about Jews. And that's always been true. That was true in the days. If you read what Henry Ford said about Jews, it tells you much more about Henry Ford than about the Jews. And I think that in some cases, we are seeing a kind of cry of those who served their country and came back to America and feel rejected, feel that they have not been trained for proper jobs, and are deeply, deeply angry at what has happened. And it tells us more about changes, the digital revolution and those who are being left behind, the fact that in contemporary America, those who have not graduated college really can't anymore get a living wage. And so all of that is going on. I think it was going on in Canada as well, but it is those kinds of people who are most likely to fall into conspiracy theory that promises them an easy answer. It's not complicated changes in the economy and transformations brought by digital revolution. There's an easy solution. Your problem is caused by the Jews. Yeah, the answer is yes, there are people in the military, but as far as I know, all of them were kind of ex-military. And as I say, what impresses me about that is that there are a lot of have-nots in this country, and they fall prey to these kinds of ideas. That is not to excuse them, but simply to explain how easy it is to capture folks who have been left behind by telling them, oh, I know what caused your problem. It was all caused by immigrants and Jews.
There's a follow-up question in the chat, and then I see, Dan, you tried to unmute a few times. so
Oh,
we'll
how
go to
do I
you.
get it?
Oh,
Can you
I will
read
read it
it?
out loud. Is the military connection a possible side effect of an all-volunteer military service instead of universal service?
I don't want to pretend to be expert at that. Of course, we have long had, actually, even after the American Revolution, look at the Whiskey Rebellion that George Washington personally had to put down. And you had people who had fought in the revolution and now didn't want to accept the authority of government. Coxey's army during the Depression, many of those people were ex-military. And that was a time when we didn't have an all-volunteer army. So I don't know that it's caused by a volunteer army, but I do think that we do as a country need to be troubled by the fact that there are a lot of veterans who are, after they are released from service, no longer seem able to get jobs. They are deeply bitter and angry, and bitter and angry people often fall prey to conspiracy and hate groups. But I leave it to others who may know more to comment on how things are different with a volunteer army and a non-volunteer army.
Okay, was there any other questions in the room? There's quite a few people here, so I can only see so many on my screen. Please feel free to unmute.
Question someone asks is about QAnon. There is now a book on anti-Semitic imagery in QAnon, and the ADL has collected quite a lot of that anti-Semitic imagery. The question really is, QAnon has mostly fallen silent since January 6th, really since the inauguration. And the question is whether it will reemerge, whether it's frightened. There have been various theories who the infamous Q is, but even if QAnon is no longer as much of a threat, I heard just today a talk here on social media and anti-Semitism, and it's not confined to the United States. In Germany too, there is great fear of the impact of social media on galvanizing, on bringing people together, on promoting various conspiracy theories that promote hatred.
So there was a second part to that question in the chat. First part being, do QAnon have explicit anti-Semitic messages, which you answered? And also, what is the best response to a friend that has conspiracy beliefs?
It's not, if there were an easy response to conspiracy theory, we would long ago have come up with it. The problem with conspiracy theory is that it offers a simple answer, and professors like me say, well, actually, it's very complicated. And as soon as I say that, I've lost. The truth is, the world is very complicated, but for people who want oversimplification, that is going to be very disturbing. I think that at least by teaching folks about conspiracy theory, as I tried to do here, and I teach at Brandeis, that material. What is a conspiracy theory? Why is it so appealing? Then at least you hope that some people will recognize conspiracy theories when they see it. But I am absolutely aware that, when I say it's complicated, and they say it's not complicated at all, it's very simple. It's all due to the Jews. That it's very hard to dissuade people, and it's especially hard, and I think we've all seen that with Congresswoman Green. Here you have major newspapers and a lot of people who say it's rubbish, and a lot of people who simply laugh, but she still comes up with this kind of conspiracy, including, I believe, the Russian Ukraine. In part, that is because social media make it so very easy to be in a kind of echo chamber where you are mostly interacting with people who agree with you and who see the world the way you do. So unfortunately, it's easier to describe the problem than to solve it.
Just a quick question. Maybe I'm being paranoid, but it comes from my being a child of Holocaust survivors. Are we near the end of Jewish acceptance in North America? Is it time to go? Or close to, from a historian's point of view?
Again, I have to say I'm better at predicting the past than the future. Look, I think every generation of Jews has been worried. I would say I think it's very important for Jews to be vigilant, that your question is not just about Jews. I know that there are all sorts of people who ask the question, are we watching the slow death of American democracy? And certainly, were we to see the end of American democracy, and as many of you know, there are lots of countries where democracy has died. Were we to see the death of American democracy, then I think it could be deeply unfortunate for Jews. Look, before our very eyes, we're watching a country where some Jews thought, oh, they're very close to Mr. Putin. Chabad and Putin are good friends. This is a great time. And you should all be looking. Dnipro is really being built up, and big Jewish centers there, and a very significant rabbi, and actually a close sister city to my community here in Boston. Another week, there may not be a Dnipro. So Jews have to be vigilant. This is the whole of Jewish history, as ups and downs, surprises, and misfortunes. The worst thing is to be complacent. But predicting history is very difficult. Being vigilant is all that we as good citizens can be and do. And I think that as we prepare for Passover, in some ways, that is the message of Passover. don't be complacent. There are always people out, as in Chad Gadya, to overtake the next one. But nevertheless, we have to have a certain amount of faith that it will turn out okay in the end, because nobody would have predicted that so many thousands of years later, we Jews would still be here. So God willing, that will continue. Let me wish everybody a very happy Passover, and thank you for taking time away from preparations to tune in.
Well, and thank you, Professor Sarna, for this talk today in partnership with our partner, Congregation Beth Israel. For all of you, if you'd like to join us tomorrow, we'll be learning with Rabbi Chaim Seid-Fedler, later this month with Rabbi Dr. Eugene Korn, and there's plenty of programs next month as well. You can access all this at valleybitmidrash.org. Have a great day, everyone.